The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Greetings from Minneapolis, everybody. Coming to you cordless. I'm Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. It's Thursday, July 17th, 2025, and this is show number 252 if you're marking your bingo cards, and I hope you are. Hope everything's well with you. Okay, so 2 nights, I was mentioning this last night. 2 nights ago at 5 p.m. here in Minneapolis, it was 93 degrees. Last night at 5 p.m. in Minneapolis, it was 61. We had a 32-degree difference over 24 hours. My wife slept with a blanket last night. There's a reason the weather people want to come here, because it's the most fascinating freaking weather on the earth. And don't get me started, it's not climate change. It isn't. We've gone through that a million times. It's not. But yeah, the weather's pretty weird. Tonight, joining us, Keith Gross, former, and I want to make sure I get this right because I got to ask him about this, former assistant state attorney to the state of Florida. I don't think he's the former state attorney general, but I'm not sure. So we got to ask him about that. And also, he wrote a book called Dirt Roads to Runways, Defending American Dream for the Next Generation. I bought it. You should buy it too. It's a good book. I enjoy it. That's tonight. Tomorrow night, we're running a rerun, as we do usually on Fridays now. And I picked it. Now I can't remember who it is. But anyway, Monday, we were going, normally we do a live show on Monday, and Don Zero was the scheduled guest. I've canceled it because we have to make some changes to our studio here. And I realized that it's going to be an all-day affair. It's going to take all day. It's going to take longer than I thought it was. And this is important, because you, the home viewer there sitting in your underwear watching this on your phone, you need a good picture and all that sort of crap. So we're canceling the show, and I'm running in its place. We're going to run a rerun of Don Zero from last month. He comes on once a month. He's kind of a fan favorite. I know that because the viewership for his shows are quite high. So I know you guys like him. So yeah, that's Monday. So no live show on Monday. Tuesday, we got Neil Gravelis, and he's an LA detective. I gotta ask him about this too. His publicist told me he's not a detective; he's a private investigator, or it's the opposite. I can't remember. Anyway, he makes a distinction between those two things. I don't know what they are. So he's one or the other. I got down here that he's a private detective. That's what I have. But he works in Los Angeles. He's worked on quite a few really famous cases. And I lived in Los Angeles, as you might know, for quite a few years. So really fast. The whole thing fascinates me. I don't know if I'd say I have a love-hate relationship with Los Angeles. I'm fascinated by the place, but I don't really necessarily like it. I've spent 5 years there, and looking back, even at the time, I wasn't sure I was enjoying it, but I do find the place totally fascinating. I really do, both historically and also contemporary too. Just the stuff that's going on. I mean, we don't even want to go into what's going on. I mean, I left way before the fires, but have you heard about this? They've only issued tens of thousands of homes that burned down in that fire. They've only issued like 4 reconstruction permits so far, because it takes them forever. Because they got, it's work, man. That's hard, All right, Wednesday we got Francis Menton coming on, and he is like a few people we had on the show previously. He's an author, but he writes about something that was not necessarily his area of expertise. He's a lawyer by trade, but he writes about economics out of Manhattan. His blog is called The Manhattan Contrarian. You can search for that online. You'll find it. Very interesting guy. Has some very interesting ideas. Looking forward to talking to him. Thursday, On the 24th, Thomas DiLorenzo, and he's the president of the Mises Institute. Now, Murray Sabrin has been our longtime economist friend here. Between here and the shows we did on Fox News, he's been on on my shows 2 or 3 dozen times at this point. He's a regular, so you might know of the Mises Institute because he talks about it constantly. He's part of it. Well, Thomas DiLorenzo is the president of the Mises Institute. It's a um, confab of professional economists, and it's of what they call the Austrian school, which is very laissez-faire, free markets. Mises was an Austrian economist out of Vienna, and they founded this institute in his name for economists of that persuasion, of which Mr. Sabrin is, and Mr. DiLorenzo is too. And I don't know if he's his boss, but he's up there. He runs that place. So he's joining us on Thursday. On Monday, the 28th, that's a week from Monday, our all-star at-night panel's back, and Don Zerro will be part of that, I think. He hasn't told me otherwise so far, along with Tim Conaway and Larry Newman. We do that once a month. That's a lot of fun. I know you guys like that because the viewership for that's pretty high, too. I appreciate it. On Thursday, the 31st of this month, the last day of this month, will be our 2-year anniversary on this program, and we're lining up all sorts of stuff. And if I counted correctly, and I'm actually including now taking Monday off, I think it's going to be show number 261, if I'm right. We're taking your calls tonight after our interview with Keith Gross. Numbers 325 call Jim, 325-225-5546. At the bottom of the screen on there. Scrolling, you can send us a text message at 408-458-5088. That's after our interview here. Mr. Gross is waiting in the virtual green room right now, and we're going to put him on. Watch this. Joining us from his home in Panama City, Florida, Keith Gross, entrepreneur, former National Guardsman. Keith, I got to ask you about this right away because I'm not really, and this is not a rhetorical question. You were running for the Senate and now you're not. What happened? May I ask?
Well, I lost the primary big time. So I ran in the Republican primary here in the state of Florida against Rick Scott because he was voting for a little more spending than I thought we should be doing. And naturally, I lost in the Republican primary against the well-known incumbent.
He's very well-known, although you are better looking than him.
Well, thank you. I like to think so.
You think that would count for something, wouldn't you?
It didn't count for enough. I think 144,000 people wanted me to be their next U.S. senator, but that was not enough.
Well, that's cool, though. You got some fans, Are you going to try again?
Probably not immediately for the U.S. Senate. That's a 6-year term. So Rick Scott will be there until 2030. And I don't think he will run again. So there's a good chance that I will be in that primary again in 2030.
I have this on my list of questions, Keith, because I really do want the answer to this. Why does anybody with a real life and a sane mind run for politics in America in the 21st century?
Yeah, that's a question I've asked myself a lot, Jim. I think when we look at the way our government works in Washington, we see this out of control, corrupt machine. And it seems like half of the people are brain dead and the other half must be blackmailed because they do illogical things. So looking at that and being a person who's really built a career in business, I mean, I've scaled multiple companies from the ground up to being national businesses and had a lot of business success that I was blessed with in life. I've paid a lot in taxes, and the more I pay in taxes, the more concerned I get about how our government wastes our money. And the harder I work to save money, the more I realize that government spending and inflation makes that all a pointless exercise. So some of us have to step up and try to take control of this out of control train, or we won't have a country left.
Keith, I put this on the list here, and I'm moving it up. And that is, what's really pissed me off just the last few days? I just found out that the Federal Reserve is spending $2.5 billion to renovate an office building. Now, the thing is, I don't know if people can keep this in context. With $1 billion, you can build a really nice skyscraper in Manhattan, $1 billion. They want 1.5 times more than that to renovate an already existing building. And I have economists on the show all the time. I don't pretend to be one. I'm highly interested in the subject. I really don't know I don't have any real skin in the fight between Trump and Jerome Powell about what's going on there. But as far as they say you have to have cause to fire the Fed chief. I think building or renovating an office building for $2.5 billion is cause. I really do. I'm just pissed as hell about this. Talking about a waste of money.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are frustrated with an out of control Fed. It's not supposed to be this way. We're not supposed to have a monetary system where the people are not really in control of the money. And you see what's happened since the Fed's taken control and we've gone off the gold standard. I think the dollar's worth about 4.5%, 5% of what it used to be. So that insanity surely isn't helped by building a $2.5 billion headquarters. That's a lot of square footage for an organization that doesn't need that many people.
Right. And supposedly, from what I understand, the average size of the office is going to be 513 square feet, which is the size of, just for people to comparison, it's the size of a small apartment, and that's the average size. I mean, seriously, this really pisses me off. It really does. It's terrible.
Must be nice to be able to print money and, inflate all of our savings accounts to get what they want.
Well, that's the problem, Keith. And I don't have to tell you. It's like, okay, we're printing money, but if you print enough money, it becomes worthless. I mean, that's what happened in the previous administration with the inflation. Every jerk, including me, sitting at home in my underwear in Minneapolis, was telling Biden, "No, if you pass this Inflation Reduction Act, you're going to end up with inflation." Every person did, and that's what happened. And they're throwing their hands up in the air saying, "Oh, we didn't know." Oh, bullshit. The hell you didn't know. It's like,
I remember thinking the same thing. What do you mean you didn't know? A fifth grader probably understands that concept. They knew. They just didn't want to do their jobs. And that's ultimately why I think more people need to get involved in the political process. The illogical things that happen in Washington have to come to an end. I mean, we're $37 trillion in debt. And even this year, our government's going to spend $2 trillion more than it takes in. We're taking in $5 trillion, spending $7 trillion. That's insane. Can you imagine doing that as a business? You'd go out of business in a year or two.
In a minute, probably. Yeah. What did you think of the big, beautiful bill? I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons. What was your opinion?
Well, I was glad to see that it funded ICE at a level never seen before because, before Biden was in office, we saw projected numbers of, I think, 40, 50 million illegal immigrants here in the United States. And then Biden let in another 11 to 15 million, depending on whose numbers you look at. That's a lot of illegal immigrants here taking up space in our states, taking up space in our emergency rooms, in our schools. And so I was really happy to see the funding for ICE. I was happy to see a lot of the cuts. They defund Planned Parenthood. They kind of halfway defunded the NFA, the National Firearms Act, totally unconstitutional infringement of firearms rights. They made it so that you no longer have to pay a $200 fee in order to register your firearms under that act, but they didn't actually repeal it. So it was the big, beautiful bill, in my view, was better than nothing. One of the best bills that we've seen in a while, but still full of half wins. Like, why can't we just have a full win? We've got control of the House, the Senate, the White House. Why can't we just get things done?
Well, tell me, am I naive? I mean, you were running for the Senate. Is it when you got 535 people that have to be appeased, or at least a good portion of them do? I mean, is it impossible to get anything brilliant done? I mean,
It seems that way. It sure seems that way because even within the Republican Party, you have a handful of holdouts who want to go the opposite direction.
Right.
You saw Thomas Massie, for example. A lot of us really believe in the way he wants to cut the size of government and cut spending. But the way he approached this bill was, well, yeah, it cuts things, but not as much as I want. Therefore, I want to vote no. Like, well, you can't say perfection is the only option. And if I don't get perfection, I don't want anything. Well, you'll starve to death if that's your choice.
Yeah, that's what bothers me too. Is like, okay, is halfway better than nothing? I would say yes, but a lot of people don't seem to think that way. I don't know.
No. And then look at the Senate this week. They squabbled and finally got, I think, $9.6 billion in rescissions passed through on a rescission bill. $9.6 billion is about 1/10 of 1% of our deficit for 1 year.
Right.
The fact that it took them a whole week to work through that. I did the math this morning when I saw it pass because I was curious. Said, let's hypothetically, what if they passed a rescission bill of this size every week? How long would it take just to take care of the current deficit? 18 and a half years, 222 weeks. That's the number.
I was going to say it's about that amount of money is about what the federal government sneezes every afternoon. It's
Right.
like, but that's an incredible figure that it would take 18 years to from the just, and that's not the debt, that's the deficit, right?
Right. And that's if they passed a bill just like this every week for the next 18 and a half years, we'd finally get to the point where we're spending as much as we're taking in. And this rescission bill included things like defunding NPR. Tell me where in our Constitution it says the federal government's supposed to force you to pay for a radio station.
No, I'm totally good with this. I think that no, the government should not be funding any media at all. And then then of course the Democrats cry, well, you don't understand. It's not just NPR. It's all the rural radio stations. I got to admit, I don't care. It's like,
no. What about this effort we've been doing and spending billions and billions on for years to bring internet to rural communities? Now they've got Starlink. There's no excuse for people not to have internet. They've got shows like yours where they can go on, get diverse opinions, and really discover anything they want to learn.
Yeah, right. These shows are amazingly, I mean, relatively speaking, amazingly, this is amazingly inexpensive to do. I mean, considering what's going on here, it's pretty amazing. You were the one thing I read part of your book, not all of it. I haven't finished it, but I read part of it. And the one thing I was really fascinated by is, like me, you are a former Democrat, or at least I would say I'm a former liberal, is what I would say. And you cited this Supreme Court ruling, District of Columbia versus Heller, as being one of the tipping points of you basically switching teams. Do you want to explain to people what that was about?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, within the journey and growing up in political ideology, there were many things, but that decision was definitely a key decision where it was just black and white, plain, that the Democrat Party didn't really value freedom for the American citizens. They wanted an all-powerful government and a weak, obedient citizen. So DC versus Heller was a Supreme Court case which was brought by firearms owners who wanted to be able to hold firearms in DC. They wanted concealed weapons permits. They wanted to have firearms in their homes. And at that time, there was effectively a firearms ban in DC and a handgun ban entirely. So even in your home, you couldn't have a handgun if you lived in Washington, DC. And the Supreme Court ultimately decided in that case that the Second Amendment was real. It actually says you have a right to have firearms, and ruled in favor of gun owners, which got rid of that decades of handgun ban in DC. But here's what really got to me with that case and the Democrat Party. At the time, Hillary Clinton was the front runner for nominee for president for the Democrat Party. And she came out and said that she believed the Supreme Court got that decision wrong, that the Second Amendment was intended only to empower state militias to own firearms, not individual citizens. Now, when you wrap your head around that idea, that that's the Democrat Party saying, you don't have a right to firearms, citizen, only the government has that right. That's just not what our founders intended. It was such a manipulation of the Constitution, and taken to its inevitable end of gun confiscation across this nation, it would lead to a massive uprising or infinite tyranny, one or the other. Either way, the Democrat Party was on the wrong track.
I was familiar with this, and the thing that got me about it is even what the definition of a militia was. Let's say you and I want to start a militia, and do we need a permit? I mean, that's crazy, And the thing is, this country is founded by citizen militias, essentially. And she's saying, well, no, you have to have our permission to have a militia, And I'm thinking, well, no, well, that makes us Venezuela. That's the way I look at it,
Right. I mean, look at if you were to apply that same sort of permissive strategy to the other rights. Do we need government permission to cite and get redress of our government? No, of course not. But, in the founders' days, the militia was the people.
Yeah,
Everyday
right. Exactly.
Citizens, it wasn't even controversial that you would have firearms. It was, a natural thing that existed at the time of the nation's founding. And they didn't seek to do anything other than ensure that the government could never interfere with that right that you already had. It was never the government giving you a right. It was the people saying the government isn't allowed to interfere with that right.
Yeah. The one thing, Keith, I've never seen anybody do, any polling company, I've always wanted somebody to do a poll of how many conservatives were former liberals, because I'm guessing it's about half.
I guarantee you it's 100% of former liberals that really ever ran a substantial business, because when you start paying taxes and dealing with the government overreach on these pointless regulations They make
Yeah.
you jump through hoops, and these hoops aren't going to do anybody any good. I
Yeah.
understand regulations when they're necessary for safety, but most of the things I've dealt with in my business career have been pointless hoopla.
Right. I know a lot of business owners who actually the regulations bother them more than the taxes.
Yep.
I don't know about you, but not to mention the fact, and this is, hypothetically, businesses should not be taxed because it's basically a pass-through tax. When you tax a business, they just pass the cost on to their consumers, and so really you're paying the consumers tax twice. Really, you know.
Absolutely.
I know it's crazy.
Yeah.
Tell me
But yeah,
about. All right. So now this is my other thing too. And speaking of business owners, George Soros is a guy who made billions of dollars on the American stock market, and now he basically wants to turn around and dismantle the system that he made money at. And I don't understand that. I'd love to interview this guy because I'd really just love to ask him, why do you think this way? Because I do not understand what's going through his head. I don't. Do you have any idea?
no, I've often been puzzled by these liberal elites. They get plenty of money. They obviously pay a lot of taxes, and they want to come up with rules that forbid everyone else from having a fair shot and a fair opportunity. They want to pass regulations and higher taxes and all these things. It's never made any sense to me. I think that if we want to do a good job of being a patriot, when you get somewhere in life and you feel blessed, you're supposed to turn around and help the people behind you, not pull up the ladder.
Yeah, and you said in your book that your way of doing that was to go into public service. I love the way you put it because you said that, it's you're doing a service for the country, and unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people in public service actually look at it that way, which I find terrible. And I think before you talk here, I think one of the proofs of that is one of the very few mistakes in the Constitution is that there are no term limits. And to me, it's obvious the reason they didn't put term limits in the Constitution is because nobody at that convention ever thought anybody would want to make a full-time job out of being a senator or representative. That was supposed to be something where you served your country for a little while, you went out, you left the farm, you went to Washington, you did some work, and then you went back home. That was the idea. That's the way all those guys, and it never occurred to them we would have senators for 47 years. That never, it didn't.
Yeah, and rightfully so. They also probably didn't think that voters were going to be insane enough to keep voting for the same people for 5 decades. It's
Yeah.
our fault as voters. We've let this happen. We can fire them every poll, but we don't.
It is. I have a good friend of mine, a business owner. He's talking about, this guy Mamdani in New York. I mean, there's a lot of people. I'm starting to think my friend has a point here. Seriously, let them elect him. He's going to destroy the local economy. He's going to destroy that city. The voters should get what they want. If that's what they want, they should, just let them have it. I don't know.
Yeah, what's pretty wild in that case with New York is that about half of the voters in that city are foreign born, not descendants of immigrants. They are foreign born individuals. And so we've gone to a point in this nation where we don't have immigrants coming in at a very slow rate, where they have time to assimilate into our culture. And, our culture adapts to them. They adapt to our culture. We all become one huge family. It's been a deluge of foreign born people that have come in and haven't assimilated, haven't wanted to assimilate. They want to bring the broken paradigms that they've left in their third world countries and apply those broken paradigms to the United States. We're seeing it in Minneapolis now. I don't remember this kid's name.
Oh, yeah.
Farah something.
Right. I can't remember his name either, but yeah. I don't know if he's going to win here or not. I don't really know. But I'm a first generation American, and my father came over to Ellis Island in 1920. He was pretty old when he had me, so that's the reason for. And I'm kind of old too. but the thing about my dad is that I still remember him talking about going to buy his very first suit. Because these guys and his brothers, he came over with his brothers, and they all started businesses. They were all independent businessmen. I still remember him talking about how much they wanted to be Americans. In other words, the goal was to assimilate. They did not want to remain in their Albanian identity. They wanted to become Americans. And now it seems like for many of these people come here, it seems the opposite. It's like they want to turn America into the place they left. And I found this kind of disturbing.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you want to come to America? Great. Come to America, be American. Let's do more of what America does, not bring the broken paradigms of your past. And hopefully folks will start to get that idea and we'll move forward. With Donald Trump in the White House, we're seeing a lot of things change in this country. We're seeing a lot of forward progress, never as much forward progress as I think a lot of us would hope, but more progress than we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, but Keith, I mean, it's only been 5 months. I mean, you gotta give the guy credit
Yeah.
just I mean, we've turned on him around an enormous amount of stuff in less than 6 months. It's really
Heck
amazing.
yeah.
And not only that, a lot of this is cultural. I mean, the thing is, the problem with letting people in the southern border is after 4 years of it, it's become normalized, and all of a sudden they've taken on this gargantuan job of sending some of these people back. And I mean, I don't know. I said after the election, I think they'll be lucky over 4 years if they even send out back half of them myself because there's so many. But even at least they've started to normalize the idea that this is wrong, which I find
Right.
kind of, interesting. I'm
Yeah, I
doing
mean, the administration, they got through one of the biggest funding packages I think any of us have ever seen. I mean, ICE is now bigger than most of the world's militaries with the funding that they just received under the big, beautiful bill. So I'm really hoping that accelerates things. And, the cool thing about what President Trump's administration is getting done is he's sort of pushing back against a lot of things that are wrong that have become normal. It's not just illegal immigration,
right.
it's the lack of executive power to actually control that branch. So you talk about term limits. Now, I've always thought, great, let's have term limits for our elected politicians, but we also need to make sure we have term limits for the unelected bureaucrats that want to run our lives, because what we don't want is bureaucrats in there for a decade or two at a time fighting against freshman congressmen that still are figuring out, where their chair is. That's going to be a bad move for the people, because the people would lose even more power in that situation.
It's just, well, it's not good for any organization. I mean, you run businesses, you understand this. I mean, I'll throw out a figure here. After 15 years max, people get stale. They do.
Often so. I mean, certainly there are exceptions to that you want to promote and put in charge of the whole organization. But generally, yeah, you need some churn in a staff over, the course of a decade or two for sure. So when you look at the executive reclaiming that power to really run the executive branch and terminate employees at will, we're getting back to what the founding fathers really wanted, because they never thought we'd be in a situation where the executive would be told he's not allowed to fire his own staff. The Constitution vests literally all of the power of the entire executive branch in one person, the president.
Right.
So that president can fire, oversee, manage, direct, do whatever he needs to do to each and every employee in the executive branch.
This just really struck me. Can you explain? You're a lawyer. Can you explain this to me? I understand. I don't agree, but I understand why some federal judges can block executive orders. But this recent bill where, and I can't remember if this is part of the big beautiful bill or not, where some judge blocked the defunding of Planned Parenthood, but this was an actual legislative action. This was a bill passed. It was a law passed by Congress, and I don't understand how that could happen. Can you?
Can't. Congress has the power of the purse. They alone can allocate funds, no one else.
Right.
We saw this with the Biden administration. He tried to basically allocate funds as president. He tried to say that he could forgive student loans when he never had the authority to do that.
Hold on. We can do this.
Welcome back.
It's amazing it works. Welcome back. Yeah. So I understand. I don't understand how this was just basically bogus, wasn't it?
It was totally bogus, because a judge just can't use the power of the purse. That's something that only Congress can do. But, talking about the power of the purse, another thing that's come up lately that's been a dispute is the executive's ability and authority to not spend money. See, the way it's supposed to work is Congress allocates money and says, hey, president, here's money that you can spend for X, Y, or Z, but you can only spend it on X, Y, or Z. They're allowed to do that, but they can't force the president to actually spend it. See, Congress has the power of the purse, but no power to execute anything.
Right.
That's solely a power of the executive branch. And the founding fathers wanted us to have two opportunities as the people to control these processes, that if Congress wouldn't do what we wanted, at least the executive would. And, we can fire him in 4 years or less if we need to. So it was just an extra check, an extra balance in the system to have an executive that could decline to spend money. Then in Congress passed, I think it was 1978, the Impoundment Act that says if we allocate funds, the president must spend it as allocated. I think that act was void from the day it was written because it seems to infringe on the constitutional powers allocated to the president. If we wanted to have a Congress that could spend money, that could allocate money and then spend it, we wouldn't have had the executive branch be the only one with the power to actually execute. The founding fathers split that authority, and Congress can't take it from the executive just by passing a law.
Has anybody ever brought these issues up above before the Supreme Court? Sometimes I wonder about this. Like, for example, I totally get how the Supreme Court, why a nation of supreme judges could stop the president from doing something via executive order, but I don't understand why one of 680 federal judges in Podunk, Mississippi can do it. I don't understand that.
Well, that's a whole separate can of worms. But in short, I don't believe that this law, the Impoundment Act, has ever been properly challenged in the Supreme Court. And I hope we see it challenged under this administration because, like I was saying, I mean, that's one of the great things about the Trump administration. He says, I don't really care about norms. I don't care that we've been doing it wrong for 50 years. We're going to look at the Constitution. We're going to start doing it the right way as long as I'm here. And, if he's able to change some of those traditional things and put them back to the way the founding fathers wanted, it'll be a huge step in the right direction for America. Now, to your question about district judges, they derive their authorization, their jurisdiction to do anything from Congress. Congress can take that away. And why they haven't, given that we have a majority, really blows my mind. The idea that a district judge could create injunction against the whole executive branch nationwide beyond the borders of their own jurisdiction, it's kind of a new legal theory that the Supreme Court really needs to curtail and bring back.
It just seems wrong to me.
It is wrong. Right now, the president, he needs unanimous consent, effectively, from nearly 700 district judges. Because if any one of them wants to stop him from enacting his agenda, they're going to put in a TRO, and then the president's Justice Department isn't out arresting criminals and investigating wrongdoing. They're going to court trying to deal with these really bogus claims that are put into court orders by some of these district judges.
The one thing that it seems like the Trump administration has done on a real flyer and talking about testing the judiciary, and this, I think, this is a great idea, was the birthright citizenship. I think a lot of people, a lot of the lawyers in administration knew this wasn't going to go through or won't, but they still thought, well, let's test it. It's never been tested before, Well,
the thing is, it actually might go through because if you read the birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment, you read the language in there, and then you look at the congressional record at the time, it was never intended to apply to persons who are inside the United States without the consent of the government. One of the key Supreme Court decisions that was on this topic is called Wong Kim Ark. And in Wong Kim Ark, the Supreme Court went to great lengths discussing the validity of someone's permission to be in the country. They, in that decision, they call it consent of the sovereign, is the traditional way of looking at it, that they granted citizenship to this particular person in Wong Kim Ark because his parents were present in the United States with the consent of the government. They pointed out that lots of people wouldn't be available to get birthright citizenship, including, say, the children of a foreign army if America was invaded. Those children born to the foreign invaders wouldn't be citizens, nor would the children of foreign diplomats who are staying at an embassy. They carved out these things, and what they didn't say clearly is that all children born to illegal immigrants are not citizens, because at the time there wasn't really a lot of illegal immigration. It was sort of a unexpected idea that any president would sit on their hands and let 50 or 60 million illegals into this nation. And when you extrapolate that case and you say, okay, well, if they decided that if you're not here with the permission of the government, you're not a citizen, that's plain as day. That means if you're an illegal immigrant, you're not here with the consent of our government. And that's where that subject to the jurisdiction thereof clause comes in. Now, the left would like you to believe that that means, well, they're here, they could be arrested for a crime, therefore they're subject to our jurisdiction. And in that sense, they are subject to that sort of jurisdiction, but that is not the meaning in the 14th Amendment. What they mean is subject to the jurisdiction, i.e. they have submitted themselves to our government to be subject to our jurisdiction. A foreign immigrant, an illegal immigrant who has come in, say, illegally across our Mexican border, let's say they're a citizen of Mexico, they are subject to the jurisdiction of Mexico. while they may be subject to arrest and prosecution while they're in our borders, they're not truly subject to our nation's jurisdiction for citizenship purposes. And that's what they were discussing.
Yeah, and I just learned this recently. I thought maybe they were just taking a flyer on this, they being the administration, but I'm kind of glad they kind of brought this whole thing to light because the assumption has been for 100 years that if you're born in the United States, you're a U.S. citizen, and that's the assumption everybody's gone under. But I'm starting to think that you might be right here, that they might well, not to mention the fact not only that they might get this victory, but that's legally that it's actually that was never meant to be that way in the first place.
Yeah, it's one more example of President Trump saying, I don't care that we've been doing it wrong for a long time. Let's start doing it right now. And the
Right.
congressional record where they were debating the 14th Amendment on the floor made it clear that it was not supposed to apply to the situations like it is now. And so I'm happy to see them moving it back in the right direction. It's what needs to happen. We shouldn't have people invade our country just to have kids.
You talked in your book about the fact that that citizens should not be hassled for questioning the results of elections, and I totally agree with that. And I'll just throw this out here. I have contended for quite a while because I think there's evidence to indicate that the 2020 election was cheated. I don't know if you agree with that, but I'm happy to tell you about my evidence because it's relatively unusual.
Well, let's hear it.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you. I've spent my entire life in the entertainment business, and what I know is that the popularity can easily be judged by the size of crowds. And I kept track of this because I was I was the editor of a conservative news organization during the election, and so I kept track of the fact that with only one exception, which was 5 days before the election, where Joe Biden drew 900 people in Pennsylvania, he didn't draw more than 200 people to any campaign event the entire campaign, whereas Trump averaged 20,000 people per campaign event. And you're going to tell me that Biden got 81 million votes? I simply cannot buy it. And my friends have told me, when I worked for the news organization, we did podcasts, and they was always saying, but Jim, you don't understand. People didn't vote for Trump, didn't vote for Biden. They voted against Trump. And my answer is everybody.
Yeah,
come on.
I agree. And I think a lot of people really saw the same thing. I mean, common sense told you that Biden wasn't popular, that no one liked him. He barely ran a campaign.
Right.
And he couldn't put 10 words together that made much sense. So,
and I don't know if you know this, that continued even into his presidency. He would, like, in Ohio State University, he gave a speech, like 36 people showed up to hear it. It's like this was a regular occurrence. Nobody ever came out to see the guy. And I just can't, even when he's president, I just can't buy the fact that he got 81 million votes. I just can't.
No, I can't either. And there were a number of statistical anomalies too, where like all of these swing counties were won. And it was just a lot of statistical, almost impossibilities that we saw. And the most disturbing thing was how people were demonized if they dared to ask questions. It was though we don't have the right to really have an inquiry. All of the court cases that were brought were dismissed without findings on the merit, almost as a knee-jerk reaction. And I think that really caused a lot of Americans who were kind of questioning things, saying this doesn't look right. Well, when all the courts dismiss it without even looking into it and just say there's nothing to see here, no evidence, no standing, get out, that's a real problem. I think we all deserve to have a serious look at that. We should have all had our chance to see a real investigation. And instead, we saw media outlets just jump to conclusions. They would say the false claims. Well, you're telling people up front that it's false, but you haven't actually analyzed any evidence. That's not reasonable.
Well, they're not reasonable. That's all there is to it. I mean, what's happened to the press in this country is a travesty over the last 50 years. That's all I can say. So, and speaking of that, oh, geez, I lost my train of thought. This is terrible. What was I going to say? Okay, yeah, you don't know, and I don't know either. And that's a problem, Keith. When you run a talk show, you should keep track of what you're going to say. You really should. I'm just giving you a heads up.
It's after coffee hour, so that's a pretty good excuse. It's almost wine 30
in Florida.
Yeah.
All right. No, I was going to say the thing. You're talking about them shutting down debate. I think a real example of this is the transgender issue, which I don't know if you've seen this consistently of all the It's amazing. Trump has been over water on every single issue he ran on, except for the Gulf of America thing, which I think is kind of hilarious. But the single biggest issue turned out to be the transgender issue, where it's 80-20. 80% of the public think this is wrong, and yet for 4 years, people were absolutely vilified for questioning it. It was terrible.
We see that across the board. If you have common sense and you start to point out things that seem very logical, the media and the far end of the left demonize you, and they just don't have any logical arguments against it. I mean, every American can look at this gender ideology and think that's not right. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, by all means, if you're an adult, go do what you want to do, but don't try to
Right.
force other people to go along with it. Don't manipulate children into thinking they need to chop off body parts and delay puberty and cause, long-term harm. That's not something that's not an American value. That's just not right.
It's not a human value.
Right.
You know this thing about pronouns for about there's been about 15,000 years of human civilization. During that entire time, the general way people address each other, they know each other, was basically based on physical appearance. You either appeared as a man or you appeared as a woman. And I've said this many times. If you're a man and you appear to me as a woman, I will address you as she. I will just inspect instinctively, and I think most people agree with that. And then all of a sudden, they came around and they tried to change 15,000 years of human civilization in like two. And I find that I'm highly insulted by this. And honest to God, I'm a libertarian. If you want to live, if you're a man and want to live your life as a woman, God bless you. I do not care. But like you said, but the problem is when you start talking about playing in women's sports, you're infringing on other people's rights.
Exactly.
But once again, my point is you shouldn't have to tell somebody what your pronouns are. You shouldn't have to. We as humans, we figured this out. We already have.
Yep. And you shouldn't be condemned for using common sense. If someone looks like a man and you treat them as a man, they shouldn't get offended just because they like to pretend otherwise. That's their right. But don't force your rights on others.
Keith, do you have children?
I don't. We're actually in the process of moving that along now. Hopefully by this time next year, I will have sleepless nights going on.
Good luck. Good luck with that. I you because you just brought up the thing about we were talking about addressing people and I am under the my impression is that I hate to say this and my wife calls me an old curmudgeon, but that I don't know about you, but when I was young, we were really stupid. But unfortunately, I think this current crop of young people is even more stupid than we were. I hate to say it, I really do. And part of my evidence of that is test scores. I mean, I don't know if you follow this. I know what's going on in Florida. Here in Minnesota, we had for many years one of the two best education systems in the United States. And the test scores, since I was in I did grow up here. Since I was in school, have been going consistently down for 40 years. It's really terrible. And the thing that bothers me, I'm talking, so forgive me here, but I'm interested in your response, is that I can sit here and talk about the fact, okay, there's propaganda in the schools. They're spending too much time talking about sex and revolution, all that sort of stuff. But you only have so many hours in the day. For every hour you're talking about Marxist ideology, you're not talking about math, And then the Chinese come and then beat the crap out of us, intellectually, And I don't understand. I just don't think it's right.
No, it's not right. I mean, the education in our country has gone downhill. When you look at the stats, ever since the Department of Education got involved, since we put the federal government in education, it's gone downhill fast, and it started costing a lot more money per student at the same time. It's a classic example of government involvement. All government's going to do is drive up the cost and drive down the quality. That's what they did in education. And like you said, they lose focus. They talk about all these various things, but they don't focus adequately on key curriculum items, math and history and so forth. There's no excuse for that. The basics that kids need to learn haven't really changed in the last 100 years. Sure, there's been some advancements in science worth talking about, but basic humanity, basic philosophy, basic math, that's been the same for a really long time. So I don't understand why they can't get that right.
Well, again, and also with this, there's also just eliminating the Department of Education. And you were talking about this what kind of bill is it? The annulment bill, or what is it
The
called?
Impoundment Act,
The
where
Empowerment Act.
Congress says if we give you money, you have to spend it.
Okay, so I'm talking to some guy who was actually running for president like last year. You don't know who he is, and he was talking. We were talking about, he was talking about, we got to eliminate the Department of Education. I thought, well, okay, if you can't eliminate it, you should be able to at least like fire 95% of the personnel and basically disempower it at least. But apparently, you can't even do that.
Well, the Supreme Court's now ruled that the president does have the authority to fire people within the Department of Education. The Supreme Court just this last week overruled a decision by, I think it was a judge out of Massachusetts, that said, no, you can't fire these people. You have to keep them on board. And so the president said, okay, well, fine, they're not fired, but they're on leave and they're not allowed to come into their office. And now the Supreme Court's gotten around to saying, you know what? That judge didn't have the authority to block the president from exercising his core duties under the Constitution to oversee the executive branch.
Is every single one of these rulings by these judges going to have to go to the Supreme Court? I mean, this is nuts.
It's nuts, and it's going to continue this way until either the Supreme Court puts out an order saying you're not allowed to do that anymore, and there will be consequences if you do, or until Congress reverses the jurisdiction that these district courts have, which they could and should do.
You're in business. What do you think of AI? Have you encountered anything here yet personally in your personal business, or are you running anything like that? Or
Yeah, I use AI as a research tool sometimes. It's really great for examining a large body of information and getting concise answers. I mean, you can tell it, for example, the one big beautiful bill. You can say, show me the bullet points of all the money this is going to spend, show me all the things it's going to cut. And it can break down a bill that might be 3,000 pages in 10 seconds. It's pretty amazing.
do you think there's going to be any problem with employment in the United States in the future because of it?
Depends on how we handle things. If we continue doing what President Trump has really worked to do, and that is reverse some of these bad foreign trade deals that have offshored countless American jobs and decimated our manufacturing economy, then I don't think AI is going to hurt. I think it's going to help. It'll allow us to be a more efficient workforce. It'll allow people to get more things done and focus less on menial tasks. I mean, look at cities all over the country. Look at Minneapolis. There's warehouses all around that city that are empty or underused now, but they used to be full of bustling businesses that manufactured everything from cardboard boxes to brake rotors. And they don't do that anymore. They import it from China. China cashes our checks and builds missiles. It's kind of a bad cycle, and hopefully the Trump administration will be the one to break it.
Yeah. What do you think of the tariffs?
That's the right way to break it. I think a lot of people are upset about tariffs, but how else do you level the playing field when you're competing against a business in China that can pay its people $2 a day and has no environmental law?
I had a guy on Monday named Spencer Morrison. Spencer is not, he's a lawyer by training, but he wrote a book on economics. And his contention is, and I'm seeing more and more people see this, and it's starting to make more sense to me, that it's actually better to have more people in the United States making more money and also maybe charging more for goods than lowering the price of goods and keeping people out of work. I know there's a term for that in economics. I can't remember what it is, but you know what I'm talking about here. Do you agree, or what do you think?
100%, I agree. I think we need to if we want to see an economy that really worked the way our economy worked in the 60s and 70s, when, on one person's salary, a family could afford to buy a house and a car and raise kids. You can't do that now. Now, both parents working full time can barely make ends meet. And that's because effective wages are lower as compared with, how much things cost. We see Americans earning a lot less today. And that's in part because we just don't make things anymore. Like everything, a
Right.
plastic bowl that we import from China. Sure, it might cost an extra $2 to make it in Ohio or Minnesota, but then you're employing someone and that money circulates in the US economy instead of being sent to China, where our enemies are going to drive up our defense costs by increasing the threats we face.
Did you ever read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins? Did you
I
ever read
did.
that?
I love that book.
Well, and yeah, the one big point he made, the one thing he just discovered is that was revenues were the only things that mattered. And that's why and I think you can apply that to the federal economy too. It's like, yeah, it's just the only thing that matters is that we keep the money here. It doesn't really matter how much anything costs. At least that's the way I look at it. But
in a large sense, that's true. Americans would be better off having American made goods. Some of it would cost more, but in the end, we would all be better off.
yeah. Okay, so let's end this, and you tell me what I don't know. Tell me what I need to know.
What do you need to know? My goodness, we we have a lot of work to do in this country for sure. And having Trump in the White House, that stopped the downward spiral that we were on. But we've still got the long next 3.5 years ahead to have the president's back and let him do his work and make sure that he gets a cooperative Congress. Because despite having a majority, Congress is still not really going out of their way to help the president move his agenda forward. And these next 3.5 years, they're going to fly by. If you're president, that's the most precious resource you've got is each day, because they tick by fast. And so if we want to see real progress, let's hope that Congress starts backing him up. Let's hope that Congress passes more rescission bills and strips the jurisdiction of these district judges.
Off the top of your head, how many people in Congress would you categorize as rhinos?
Probably 40, 50 of them. A lot
Yeah.
of them are pretty open about it, and a lot of them are a little quieter about it and tend to try to do the right thing when the cameras are on. But then you go and look at the amendments they file, and it doesn't really add up.
Sometimes I just wonder, are these people just trying to appease people and decide they want everybody to be their friends? I don't know. It seems kind of gutless to me, That's the kind of the way I look at it. But
yeah, I mean, you see this in business too. You see these people who they're more interested in being likable and being popular and having people smile at them than they are in being effective. We need more people who are interested in being effective, not liked.
yeah, well, the problem, but conversely to that, I can make the point that, I mean, what's going on in New York City, there's a whole bunch of people who aren't even aware of like, for lack of a better term, what works and what doesn't, It's like, it's kind of frightening. Did you ever see the movie Idiocracy? Did you ever see that?
No.
Okay, it's about basically it's about the America in the future, and everything completely breaks down because all of government comes down to celebrity. That's what the book is about. And sometimes, or the movie, and that sometimes I think, I don't know. It's like there's so many people who don't, they're called low information voters or whatever you want to call them. I don't know, but it's like they don't seem to understand even the basic thing. I mean, just here's an example. It's like socialism has never worked anywhere. It's been tried. It's been tried. I will give the Russians a little leeway in 1917 because it had never really been done on that scale before. So okay, they tried that. It didn't work. It's never worked anywhere. The Venezuelans went from being the most prosperous country in South America to now they're eating their pets. I mean, it's terrible, but the thing is, like, no one ever seems to learn this. And then everyone says, no, we can do it different. No, you can't.
And you'd think it's common sense, right? You take away the incentives for being productive. Guess what you're going to get? People saying, well, why would I go to work if I don't get to keep what I earn?
Thank you. You should put it in one sentence. Thank you very much. That's right. So what's in your future for the next couple of years here?
I'm working on growing my law firm. I run a law firm here in Panama City. We've got a couple offices in the state of Florida, and I've got some associates that do great work. So we're moving that forward. I like to help business owners grow and scale their companies. So that's definitely going to be a focus. I've got some other interests, and like I said, getting ready for kids here in the next year. So picking out strollers and doing all the things one does.
Good luck with that. I put your book on the screen here. So we'll put a link up on our blog too. I enjoyed what I've read so far. I've read about half of it. So yeah. So and Keith, I actually paid for it too.
Well, I sure appreciate that. It's very kind of you to support the book. It's also an audio book on Audible if you get bored.
Who read it? Did you read it?
I did.
Good.
It was a good way for me to proofread. I was sitting there with a pen the whole time. I'd have to stop the recording and make notes to myself about correcting typos. So it was a great way to proofread and get the Audible done all at the same time. It was a good process. And I think we set the book to the lowest price Amazon would let us set it. So the idea was always just to share the message, not to actually earn revenue.
Right. I gotta admit, I bought it for a really low price. So yeah. Hopefully others will too.
Hopefully so. Together, I think we can move the country in a good direction.
Every little bit helps, Keith. That's what I've come to the conclusion. Not a lot of people watch the show, relatively speaking, to like the 5 or something like that. But there's hundreds of people doing what I'm doing here, and so hopefully, cumulatively, we have a little bit of an effect. That's what I'm hoping. So
I think so. You're out there fighting the good fight, and I appreciate that you're doing it. So thanks so much for having me on.
I appreciate you being on too. I really do. I appreciate what you're doing. You take care. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Thanks. That was Keith Gross, lawyer, entrepreneur, former candidate for Senate in the state of Florida. Good guy. Nice talking to him. I'm talking out loud now, but man, it bothers me middle of an interview when I all of a sudden blank out. I don't know if that's age or what the hell it is, but I mean, I'll be honest with you. Doing this is not easy. I'm trying to listen and formulate what I'm going to say next at the same time. And then you try doing that for 50 minutes, but still, it just bothers me. I'm sitting there talking to them. All of a sudden, I don't know what to say next. It's terrible. All right, you can call us up now. 325 call Jim 325-225-5546. We'll take your calls. Actually, we won't because I did not turn the call-in system on. Damn. All right, so let's forget it. See, that's terrible too. I didn't turn it on. I got it right up here. It's like it's all booted up and everything. I did not actually turn it on. Now you'd say, well, turn it on now, but it takes you have to cycle through a bunch of stuff. So I can't do it while I'm doing the show with you. So I screwed that up. God damn. All right. So what do you want to know today? I've been playing with this thought. A woman named Emma Jo Morris wrote an article in Breitbart. This is about 2 months ago now, because it was about the White House Correspondents' Dinner that happened in Washington, D.C., what they still call, what I'm talking about, the Nerd Prom. She went there, and she said in the middle of the whole thing, it occurred to her that, people talking about the political divide in the United States and even Keith Gross was just referring to this, of how the press is so relentlessly liberal. And then it occurred to her that no, the problem isn't that they're liberal. The problem is that they're crazy. And she didn't mean just haha, nice crazy. She meant actually mentally disturbed. And I thought, well, man, that's actually an interesting idea, because the press does stuff that never, even from a terms of a partisan standpoint, often do not make sense. And maybe you have to be as into it as I am to notice that. But I notice a lot. I see the press do stuff that actually, it's not just partisan, it's nonsensical. So David Strom, and I gotta send him a note. I want to put a link up on our blog of this too, even though the blog needs to be updated. It hasn't been updated in a few days. I know that. I'm sorry. Strom wrote an article today in Hot Air about the fact that maybe that's the truth too, what is this guy's name? I can't remember. And Red State wrote an article about this too, about the fact that this guy was on, he was on Chuck Todd's podcast. Scott McFarlane, who writes for CBS News, said that he was in Butler on the day that Trump got shot. And he said he was worried about his personal safety because he thought the crowd was going to turn on the reporters. And like Strom points out, that's such an insane idea. It's like the fact that came out of your mouth that alone is nuts. Here the president almost got killed. One man actually did get killed. A couple other people were critically wounded, and this guy's worried about the crowd turning on him. He said he got post-traumatic stress disorder from this whole thing, from basically something that's in his head. There's no, I can assure you, and Strom said the same thing. There's nobody in that crowd who was thinking about reporters at that moment. Nobody. But in this guy's mind, in Scott McFarlane's mind, they were thinking about him. And that's crazy. That's crazy shit. And I'm starting to think that Emma Jo Morris might be onto something here. That the real problem with the press is that these people are literally insane. They're in a professional class that is now attracting insanity. And I think I actually do think I think really we have to start thinking about this. I have no idea why insane people are drawn to journalism. I don't, but I'm starting to think maybe there's something to that. I really am. Because this has gone way beyond partisan bullshit. It has. Congress is partisan. First of all, the press is not supposed to be partisan at all, but they are, and we know that. But it has gotten to levels now where it's beyond partisanship. It's just insanity. So yeah, I don't know. I cannot understand what's going on there. I mean, McFarland's crazy. This is crazy shit that he would think that the crowd was going to turn on him for just being there. It's like, first of all, 80% of the people in the crowd don't even know who he is. There's that. And I just like, really, the president, the front, once and future president came this close, a centimeter close to being killed. One guy did get killed, and you're worried about the crowd turning on you and hurting you. God, I can't get over it. On this day in 1955, Disneyland opened. Apparently, it did not go well on the first day. Well, new experiment. I don't. I guess there were theme parks before then. I mean, you can count Coney Island. Uh, was in the middle of Lake Minnetonka. It only lasted for 5 years, but it was a huge park, from what I understand, and it was very popular for the short period of time that existed. And so there were, but Disneyland was a theme park like no other, and it kind of started that sort of trend of theme parks like that. But apparently, the first day did not go well. But Walt Disney was there. Now, I actually now think Walt Disney would be rolling over his grave if he found out what happened to his company. I really do. It's like they have there's I don't say this as an opinion because they have come out and said this. So I assume that they're verifying what I consider to be a fact, and that is they have now decided that they'd rather uh, promote a political ideology than entertain adults and children. That's the only thing I can come up with here. And like I said, the reason I saying that is because they say it now. And it seems like the corporate lords there are trying to reverse this trend, but the company is so filled with social activists that they're having a very hard time turning that ship around. And I don't know if you know this. I've talked about this in the past. I mean, there's very few movies that they put out anymore that make a profit. At this point, at the rate they're going, this company will fold in a few years. They're making movies that cost enormous amounts of money that don't make their money back. Some of them not even close. I mean, I can't remember what it was. Um, I'm not going to try talking about that because I'm talking off the top of my head and I can't remember. But the vast majority of the movies that Disney put out in the last 2 3 years have not even come close to making a profit. Matter of fact, I think in the last year was only two. They put out only two movies that made a profit. Out that an organization has figured out that um, elephants can gesture to indicate what they want, like humans can. In other words, nonverbal communication. They figured out that and not only can elephants do it, they can do it very easily, and they found this out by uh, bribing them with food. So that was not that's that's not. In other words, the point is that's not necessarily a talent of higher primates per se. There's a lot of things we're finding out that animals can do that aren't, exclusively the domain of humans. I mean, dolphins can communicate quite well within each other, and we're just figuring out their language. Same with orangutans and octopus, man. Octopi, that's just a whole different deal. It's like, I'm not kidding about this. There's a very good possibility that octopi come from outer space. That they wrote in some octopus uh, sperm, wrote in on comet or something like that, and the next thing you know, because I don't know if you know this, but octopi have DNA completely different than any other species, any other animal on Earth, and they're very very smart, and it's just a whole weird deal. It's like that should not, they should not be here. So, and I talked about this, well, I think a couple nights ago, about the fact that so this boat that relatively works in Lake Michigan had to go into dry dock for maintenance, and they scraped off of it this weird black goo. And turns it was a research ship for, I think, the University of Michigan or something like that. So because it's a research ship, they took the goo to a lab to have it analyzed, and they found out that not only is it alive, but it has a DNA that no one's ever seen. It's just people. There's stuff being discovered everywhere. It's just unbelievable. Connie Francis died yesterday. She was 87. I don't know if that means anything to you. She is a woman. Well, actually, she's not of my era, just before it. But I know, but I knew who she was. She had a fairly tragic life. After a concert, she got raped in a hotel room, and apparently, it screwed up her life and her marriage for years and years. Her father basically kind of not so much abused her, but overlorded her. Um, she, by her own admission, she did not have a happy life. That's the way she said. But she's a fairly good singer, and for quite a few years, matter of fact, she was actually popular into the early 1980s. She could still draw crowds even then, even though she started in the 1950s. But anyway, she died at 87. And legendary skydiver Felix Baumgartner also passed away, and he passed away doing a stunt was it in Poland or Spain? I don't have the listed here. He was doing he had died in a paragliding accident, which is what he did, and he was famous for doing the longest parachute jump ever in history, 127,000 feet. Not only that, well, this is kind of a really interesting, or it interests me anyway, uh, sideline to that fact, and that is it was also the highest man parachute. No, not no, the highest man balloon flight ever. So he wasn't the only person on the flight. They had a crew there. It was the highest point anyone had ever been in a balloon that humans had ever been. There were balloons that had gone up higher than that, but they were unmanned. This was the highest manned balloon flight ever, 127,000 feet. Now, that's not quite space. Space is considered 62 miles, if I'm right, but still pretty cool. He jumped from there and lived to tell about it. But and apparently, I think this was Spain. Apparently, he was communicating during his paraglider flight that he suddenly felt very ill. There's no he might have had a heart attack or anything, but he lost control of the paraglider because of some physical problem he was having, supposedly. So it wasn't that he crashed because of that. It wasn't that he crashed and it killed him. He had some sort of physical medical issue while he was doing this, and that led to his demise. Very unfortunately, he was 56. So what else do you want to know? Yep, I'm ending on a downer. That's what I'm doing. So yeah, we're done for tonight. Tomorrow or Monday, like I said, no live show. We're gonna run a rerun of Don Zora from last month. I think it's from the 18th of June. That's off the top of my head. I'm not sure. Uh, and of course, we're running a rerun tomorrow, but I can't remember what it is. Now we've run reruns on Fridays. We've never done shows on. That's not actually true. I think we've done in the 253 shows we've been here. I think we've done 2 or 3 shows on Friday nights, live ones, because I did it to accommodate guests. I think, but generally we don't do shows here. We do them Monday through Thursday. So, but we're running reruns on Fridays. So you tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern on Rumble or YouTube or wherever the hell you're watching, Twitch or Trovo or Twitter. And yeah, we're running a show on Monday through Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. And so we're so that's what we got coming up on tomorrow. And then on Monday, it'll be the rerun for Don Zorro. And then Tuesday, let me see who we got to again. Oh, Neil Gravilis is his, I gotta figure out how to pronounce his name. The LA detective or LA private investigator. Like I said, apparently his publicist said he's very picky about what he's called. But I didn't actually get what the right call is, so we'll ask him about that. We'll figure that out. That's Tuesday, the 22nd. I want to thank you folks for watching a lot. I really appreciate it. We like doing this stuff. We like it. We're all booked up for another month here. Got stuff going on. Like I said, Thursday, the July 31st will be our 2-year anniversary here. Be 2 years. And I'm not going to say we got coming on yet, but we're putting something together. So we got it going on, folks, because I'm okay boomer. Yeah. Yeah. I want to thank you for watching. Really, really appreciate it. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are. And good night to you, wherever you may be. So we'll see you live on next Tuesday night, folks. Okay? You take care. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you.